The food insecurity inside Syria has reached to alarming levels. The UN confirms that Syria is one of the 23 countries worldwide that have been identified as a hotspot where hunger would increase again to new alarming levels and new highs in the next months and even year. So far, you have almost 13 million people who are food insecure, and this is almost double as it was last year. So the situation has never been worse than it is at the moment, and this is mostly because of the increase in prices, the devastated economy, the lack of stability and security inside the country, but most importantly, it's also as a result of the loss of jobs and purchasing power that people are experiencing at the moment inside Syria since the COVID-19 health crisis started. And the situation that they are experiencing now, with literally no ability to buy the food that they need, and then the bare necessities, is pushing people to even sell sometimes their own items and personal items to get food and what is needed, because it's simply not enough. As I said, this comes as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, which adds another layer of insecurity in their lives since the conflict started a decade ago. Children themselves are suffering the most. The children who are suffering of malnutrition is the number of children is actually on the rise, with 500,000 children under the age of 5 actually suffering from malnutrition, and are 90,000 of them are malnourished and acutely malnourished. Families are doing what they can. They are adopting, sadly, negative coping mechanisms. So, which this includes sending children in the street to beg until late at night, marrying their girls from an early age, or simply asking children themselves to go and get employment. And of course, you can imagine the employment conditions, whether you're talking about work conditions or simply payment, are insufficient and are really putting children at risk themselves, having to find a transportation to get to the place of employment, with strangers, unaccompanied, and really in outside, let's say, safe hours. So we spoke to a Syrian father, I think just last month, and he was a father of 5 children who had been borrowing money from other people in the camp to be able to feed his family and try to cover the basic needs. He was not able to find a job, either because of the stress levels that he's going through, or simply because of the mobility restrictions due to COVID-19. We were thankfully there as World Vision, and we were able to provide cash assistance. So the father was able to repay some of his debts and the money he owed. And then he was able to also procure basic needs and basic items for the family and the five children. So I think that what we are witnessing and what our teams are witnessing on the ground is a really terrific story that is sounding the alarm of what can be the worst hunger crisis in the world. World Vision has been on the ground since the COVID pandemic started, but of course since the crisis inside Syria started back in 2011. So we are doing everything it takes to address the root causes of hunger, and we are able to provide support to several sectors, such as water, sanitation, hygiene, education, protection, health, and livelihood. All of these are actually helping people recover from the stress that they are facing, and are able to either find employment or to deal with the trauma and the distress that they have been facing that kept them away from employment. So fighting hunger and malnutrition is one of the priorities for World Vision Syria Response, and cash assistance is one of the modalities through which we are able to support Syrian refugees, either inside Syria or in Jordan, for example, where we have a program that really gives families hope and a livelihood through the cash for work project that we made happen for Syrian refugees in Jordan. Just recently, a family informed us that a family of two, so mother and father, informed us that thanks to this program, they were able to send their children to school, and most importantly, their eldest was able to continue high school education. So I think this is sort of a telling story of how World Vision Syria Response does provide the necessary support and assistance for families to ensure they can cover their daily expenses and have a decent life like like any of us does. But this has never been a simple act or a simple assistance, and we've been facing challenges all over, and the most important is indeed access to those people. That's the most challenging obstacle that we have faced, and is hindering the work of humanitarians across the world, including inside Syria. While we've been advocating over the past months for a 12-month extension to the cross-border resolution that provides us access to Syrian displaced in the northern part of the country, the newly voted resolution has been extended for 6 months, with a potentially of renewal after the 6 months upon certain conditions. But we are, as humanitarian workers, we are dependent on the political nature of these negotiations and on the potential negative impact that we have already seen and we can attest to over the past years and months, even more so. So insecurity remains a challenge for us, because if we cannot reach out to these people are still being exposed to indiscriminate attacks, to shelling, to EIDs. Everything can happen inside Syria, and we are worried about the number of attacks that we have witnessed, even against humanitarian workers. 44 humanitarian workers died over the last year, according to the UN. So Syria is not a safe place, and that remains the biggest challenge for World Vision Syria Response, where we need to take care of our beneficiaries and the people we serve, but we also need to be mindful of the stress and the toll that the whole crisis can take over our own staff in the field. But World Vision, Syria Response, and as a partnership, we do remain committed to support and alleviate the suffering of those who have simply had enough of of violations and continuous attacks and risks for their lives. So we will strive to make sure that every single of our project and program actually helps alleviate that suffering and helps people rebuild their lives within the limits of the context. I personally have worked for Syria Response for just a year, and I can attest to the testimonies that we have been hearing, and I have been hearing, and the number of occasions when it simply surpassed all possible understanding of what's really going on and how these people might be feeling. Sometimes their stories of life are stories of life for ourselves. So the children need hope. And that's what I have personally been witnessing since I joined. They need hope. They need to be able to rebuild their lives and to believe that they can do that. So for this to happen, they need the conflict to end, and they need to have access to schools. I think that's the most critical aspect of their lives, even as we speak. But to what we're witnessing now, and to the levels of insecurity, but also the alarming levels of food insecurity, I personally never witnessed that before, and I'm in the sector for at least 8 years, but it has never been that bad. People simply don't have food, and that is something that doesn't look like it's going to get better. And with a devaluation of the Syrian pound, we are expecting the worst case scenario, and we do need to be on the ground, and we do need to be there for the children and their families, not just the ones we serve, but the entire community. What needs to happen at the moment is that everybody needs to understand that no child should die because they don't have food on the table. We are in the 21st century, and we have the power to stop hunger, and we need to do it now. And every single one of us, but most importantly, all governments and donors, need to be made aware of what we are witnessing on the ground, and not to let that happen. So we do call on all governments and on all donors to invest more in cash-based interventions to allow the Syrian people to have more freedom to choose freely what they really need. And we do need to remember that 13.4 million Syrians are living inside the country, and they need some sort of assistance. The needs are immense, and we need every single government to rally with us in making sure children of Syria are safe and don't die because of hunger.